Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Rock and Roll Gypsy Diaries. I'm your host, Andy Thunders, the Rock and Roll Gypsy, and I'm here with a fellow Rock and Roll Gypsy, David Smith of Gypsy's Kiss, what I call on my radio show the star of the tree on the Iron Maiden family tree. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, my friend. Good to speak to you. You're looking well.
Thank you. You are too, man. So just to give our viewers an idea, I'm friends with you, so I know, but when I say you're the star at the top of the tree, you are friends with Steve Harris since high school, right? And you guys formed a band outside of school?
Steve and I went to school together. Our school was in Leighton. I lived in Leighton and Steve lived in Leighton. Stone Iron Maiden fans will know that. We lived about a mile apart in East London, and we were school pals. And we left school at about the same time. And so the star at the top of the tree is that when we left school, Steve and I we had a shared love of rock music and football, soccer to you guys. We're both supporters of West Ham United. So we had that in common. And it's always good to get a few more fans from across somewhere anyway. We wanted to form a band. So he and I did, and that was in mid 1973. It was just he and I. He wanted to be a drummer, but realized he didn't have the space or the money to buy a drum kit, so decided he wanted to be a bass player. So I helped him buy his first bass, which for guitar and bass aficionados was a copy of a Fender Telecaster bass, which is his first bass.
I was going to ask you, what was the bass that you bought?
It was a Fender Telecaster copy. And he played through a absolutely cheap amp, the make of which I can't remember, but we were both, we lived in East London was a very poor area. Neither of us had any income or money. So we formed the band of the two of us, and we went through various iterations of a lineup. And by early 74, we had initially formed the band called Influence, and we renamed it Gypsy's Kiss. And Gypsy's Kiss, as you rightfully say, Andy, is the band at the very top of everybody's version of the Iron Maiden family tree, and everything derived from that, which was Steve and I going to school together. And we played around the venues that were synonymous to Iron Maiden: Ruskin Arms, Carlton, Bridge House. And it's a long while, clearly a long while ago now, 1974. But we were quite a decent band. We were doing a mixture of stuff that I'd written. And because that wasn't enough to fill a full set for the evening, on covers, and perhaps when we've got more time, or even now, we could talk about those covers we played in our early set, because they're really interesting. Because if you've got Iron Maiden fans tuning into this, and I bet you have, they will, well, what were the first songs that Steve and maybe me played and were interested in? And I've still got our first set list we played at the Cart and Horses in Stratford in East London in April 1974.
You'll have to give our the Rock and Roll Gypsy Diaries followers a show sometime.
Yes, I'm happy to do that. And so it was a mixture of 4 or 5 of our songs, because we're starting writing and doing things then, and then covers we had to fill the set. And Gypsy's Kiss lasted about a year and a half, for various reasons. We were all young. And we had different directions and things we wanted to do. But the good thing is that's 40, God, what year is it now? It's 47 years on, and we're still all friends. So the original lineup of Gypsy's Kiss was myself, Steve, Paul Sears, who's still a really good friend of mine, on drums, and Bob Vascoil, who joined us latterly to do some vocals along with myself. And a guy called Tim Evans, who I must admit I haven't seen for 45 years, who joined us on second guitar a bit later than that. So that's that. You're quite right. That's our star at the top of the tree. And hopefully, well, I like to think so, that some of the music that Iron Maiden fans hear now at least had some influence from those early days.
Well, I mean, when I first heard Influence, and I knew, obviously, because as a kid, for me growing up in the 90s, I think it was like a Real Live Dead one, the 2 CD set they put out from the Fear of the Dark tour. Not the best performances, but we all know what was going on at that time. And inside the booklet, because, you know, that's before the internet and you had all these distractions. So like I had that experience of listening to it and looking at the booklet, reading what was in it, absorbing it all. And there was a family tree and Gypsy's Kiss was there. And this was before the early years DVD set came out. So, you know, to finally be able to hear what you sound like, when I heard it, even though I knew Steve wasn't on it because it was re-recorded, when I watched the video for Influence, I'm like, I can hear where Steve was going, and you know, I can hear the, you know, stuff that you're talking about there.
That, Andy, as you know, but for your listeners, that Influence was effectively the first song Steve ever played on.
Yeah, but it's weird because I could like, because it's a different, I love it, and I love that song, and I love, you know, the EP and the album I've played on my radio show plenty of times, but I could even pick up on it. Like it was just like, okay, yeah, I can hear that, you know.
We the only interestingly, I mean, these are songs I wrote in 73 and 74, you know, 2 lifetimes ago almost. And Influence, interestingly, was the only song I could absolutely remember all of the lyrics to.
Really? That's funny.
Yeah, the others, the other 74 songs that we've re-recorded, I'm about 50 or 60% on the lyrics. The music's the same, but you know, I just could, you know, we didn't write things down at the time, and you know, we recorded versions that had different lyrics because I'd forgotten.
Well, the nice thing is you've had so much time where like Ozzy used to do in Sabbath in the early days, if he screwed up the lyrics, he'd just rhyme with it. He had that.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Well, I mean, all bands do that now, don't they? You get away with what you can get away with. So that one is pretty authentic. The only real difference, I think, well, the only difference is it was a bit quicker in those days because, you know, this was just about sort of pre-punk. You know, and it was so we speeded up a lot of the stuff we played. So what you've heard, and
plus when you're younger and you're playing,
you got more energy.
Audience, you know, it's like speed or something like that. You know, I think Lemmy said it's better than screwing, and I get what he means.
Yeah, jury's out on that one, but yeah, I get the point. Yeah. So you know, that was the early song that we used to perform, and it's reasonably authentic. Other than it's, you know, hopefully what we recorded a few years ago had the benefit of slightly more advanced recording facilities than we would have done. You know, we'd have done on cassette tapes at the time. But it's pretty similar. And the other songs that, you know, when we're on stage now, I introduce us from the 74 vintage, you know, the ones we played at those very early gigs. You know, the 4 still remember, the 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 4 we still perform. They're pretty authentic to what we did at the time.
Nice.
You know, and what we were trying to achieve, which, you know, Iron Maiden themselves have taken on, I think, to a different level, was that, you know, we were in what was, you know, going through English and British music at the time of twin guitars, Hyman High's guitar. Oh, we're 3 of us now, you know, like I made.
Yeah. Wishbone, Thin Lizzy kind of thing.
Wishbone, Thin Lizzy, absolutely. You know, that was what we were trying to achieve, and you know, that was what we were doing then, and so it's sort of what we're still doing now.
It's great stuff for people who haven't heard it. It's Heat Crazed Vol retailed. And it's brilliant stuff. And I knew about the song Heat Crazed Vol because Steve had mentioned it in the early.
He mentions it in his videos, doesn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, I always wondered what a Heat Crazed Vol was. Can you tell our audience what a?
I have told you before privately, Andy, haven't I? Exactly where that came from. Well, okay. So it does have a sort of basis of truth. A vole is a small water rodent. I don't think they're indigenous to Britain, but they're like a smaller beaver.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and there was in 1973. I do remember actually. There was a news report that in a heat wave in Britain, some of these rodents had become rabid or had somehow got some form of rabies.
Why does
And
it sound like a Monty Python sketch?
yeah, exactly. It's exactly what it was like. And there'd been some instances where humans had been attacked. And I was 17 or something at the time, 16, 17, 18. And, like you do when you're young, this could make a great song. So I presented it to the band.
Right, Zappa, Weasels Ate My Flesh.
Do you know, I think that was in my head. That would have been in my head, because that's a great album, by the way. You know that's a great album. So I'm sure that was in my head. And so Steve mentions this in the video because I've heard it and we've spoken about it subsequently. He still makes him laugh. So I presented this song, which you know now, and it's pretty authentic to what it was then, to the band. And they sort of went, yeah, great song, not sure about the lyrics and the subject. So we gigged it.
Steve thought it was a great title.
Well, that wasn't his early thought of it, actually. I think his video was being very kind about that. So we gigged it as Heat Crazed Vol a couple of times, in 74. And then somebody suggested, it might have been Steve, that we changed the lyrics slightly. And Andy, I don't know if I told you this before, it became Rock and Vol rather than Heat Crazed Vol.
But that sounds cornier.
It's a bit cornier. Well, that's what I thought. So we gigged it a few times as Rock and Vol. And then, the events took their turn. So when I started doing this all again, or put the semblance of some of the band together and wanted to reform Gypsy's Kiss, we went back to the original title of Heat Crazed Vol, which you know now. So it has a semblance of truth behind it. Whether I dreamt some of that or had been drinking too much, and cheers, by the way, that day, it was that was the genesis of it. That there were these rabid voles, rodents that were attacking humans somewhere in Britain. So the song Heat Crazed Vol seemed like a great idea.
I don't see anything wrong with it at all. It's social commentary.
Andy, I'm playing this now to audiences in 2021, and sometimes I look at them and think, what are you singing back to me there? Is this? Are we all laughing at each other in a way there? But people seem to like it. You'd heard of it before we'd spoken.
Yeah, and then I mean, it's a great fucking song. It's got a great fucking bass riff, and it's got a great groove, and it's rocking, and you've got a great voice, man.
Thank you. And it's got surreal lyrics as well, which is always a bit of fun, isn't it?
Well, that's what I like about it. Mixing the reality with the surreal. I've always liked that in rock music, and it's not something you get too often these days. So what did you do in the interim between? I mean, it's quite a large gap, so I'm curious.
Okay, it's a large gap of about 30, 40 years, isn't it? So so immediately after we disbanded Gypsy's Kiss, Steve went on to Smiler and then on to Maiden. That's quite well documented as well. Although we were still keeping in touch. We lived very close to each other.
Yeah.
I did a few other short-term things. One with Doug Sampson, who was drummer with Iron Maiden on the Soundhouse tapes. Doug's still a friend.
And I think he was the drummer in Smiler too.
That's right, he was. And he and I did a sort of thing, band for a short time. But immediately after Gypsy's Kiss, and I'm talking to an American now, so you'll appreciate this more than most Brits will, is I joined a country and western band. Because that's my guilty pleasure still, country and western. I still love it.
I mean, I like Johnny Cash. I like a little bit of Willie Nelson. I like Hank Sr.
So I played in a country and folky. I played in a country and western band for a bit because it paid an awful lot more money than what I was getting before.
That's strange to think about in the UK, though.
Yeah, well, it was sort of at the time in the 70s, late 70s. Country and western, you played in social clubs, or what we had is working men's clubs.
Okay, and I'm sure bands like the Eagles probably broke down some barriers.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did that for a bit, and then I played in some other bands, and I was working as well. and then I did 80s. I sort of mostly did stuff on my own. I did solo stuff, none of it any great shakes, but I did that. I played with a variety of different covers bands in the 90s. I recorded a couple of albums in 2000 and something, and played in an events band, which is probably the most money I've ever earned, from 2006 to 2015, 16 or something, playing big venues for corporate events and things.
Oh, wow.
And then had been asked over, a lot of that time, well, you must reform Gypsy's Kiss. People want to hear it. They want to hear the original songs. And I was hugely skeptical about, no, they don't. And then was asked for Burfest, which is a charity festival that raises money for multiple sclerosis in memoriam of Clive Burr. So I did that. I reformed a version of Gypsy's Kiss for that, which had a couple of the original members on it, not Steve, obviously. And the reaction was great. So we did another one of those. And then I thought, well, maybe there is an audience for some of this. So, reformed a version of Gypsy's Kiss, which is what you hear now. We re-recorded the old songs that you referred to that we played in 74, added a couple of new ones that I'd written since, and they went down great. And live audience, I think I still see us more as a live band than a recording band, frankly, but the reaction was great. So over the past couple of years, which have been wasted years for many, of course, we recorded the album 74 that you kindly played on your radio show, which is,
a great
reaction
album.
has been great.
Thank you for sending me the signed copy. I love it. I cherish it. It's a great album. Every single song I love, but my favorite one is Smoke and Mirrors. Yeah,
that was the first one we recorded from that. It was in 2019, I think. Thank you very much.
Songs, right?
Sorry.
Those are all new, fresh songs, right?
All everything on that album has been written in the past 2 years or so, 2 or 3 years. And we're really pleased with it. Reaction's been great.
Lyrics, everything is great.
Yeah, and the nicest thing, and this is not meant to offend at all, Iron Maiden fans or people that had followed me and us for years, is that we had a review in Classic Rock magazine that you may know of, but it's a sort of doyen of classic rock, particularly in Europe, that had reviewed the album, and that's always nice, and said how much they liked it, but said, here's a band who are probably only remembered as being at the top of the tree of the Iron Maiden family tree, but are credible in their own right. And that's for us, that's a really nice thing to hear.
That's the same thing I firmly agree with. And I think that's pretty much what I told, pretty much anybody who listened. Like, honestly, it's definitely Iron Maiden related, but the songs and the band can stand on their own merit.
I think, you've heard the album, Andy, and the opening track, Take Me Down, which was probably my favorite, actually.
That's a great song.
It is a deliberate nod to Iron Maiden.
The gallop.
It's got that vibe about it. It was done deliberately as a homage to Iron Maiden, not in any way trying to copy or insult.
No. It's got the Iron Maiden gallop and stuff, but you guys have your own style. As weird as it sounds, you have more of a majestic, whimsical kind of sound than even Maiden has post 2000.
That's very kind. Maybe we've got that sort of whimsical, as you mentioned it before, Monty Python Britishness about us that's in there somewhere.
Well, I mean that in a good way, not in a bad way. Led Zeppelin were like that at their highest points with like No Quarter and stuff like that. And Blue Oyster Cult with Astronomy and stuff like that. I'm referring to that era in rock, but because the stuff is new, freshly written and freshly produced, it doesn't have that dated quality to it at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And that's very kind. It's always good to hear other music professionals say, well, I like this because it sounds like this, and you're on the right track.
It captures everything I love about rock music, hard rock, whatever, or that era of proto metal, but it captures it in such a perfect way. It's like you've got a little bit of everything from this eclectic pot, but it's so cohesive.
Well, as you and I have spoken about before, our demonstrative influences would be, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, Thin Lizzy, Wishbone Ash, definitely. But as I think Maiden similarly are influenced, it would include Jethro Tull and Yes and Genesis, bits of that, because
a little bit of Uriah Heep in there by chance.
Sorry,
a little bit of Uriah Heep too.
Oh, absolutely. We've had reviews. Of live reviews, and they have lots of them liken us to Uriah Heep, or in a flattering way, like Uriah Heep. And Atomic Rooster, is that a band familiar to you, Andy?
Yes, it is.
I sort of think that we sound like a very British band.
Yes.
I'm British, I'm good with that. But the good thing is we've sold a lot of CDs and stuff to the States and around Europe. It may be people like yourself are helping us, but we've got a growing sort of fan base in the States, which is great.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised, because here in the States, it's very after talking with Gypsy Lee Pistolero and a few others, it's pretty difficult just because of the way music is marketed and stuff over here as opposed to over there. Especially with the radio stuff, like it's almost like if you don't already have the ability to sell out stadiums everywhere you go, they're not going to even take a chance, which is the opposite of the way the music business used to be in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way the music
without that, the amazing bands like Led Zeppelin and the Grateful Dead and all these bands that people herald as legends and groundbreaking artists and stuff, they wouldn't have been able to do anything in this climate.
Well, no, and the thing that you and I will know, because we were talking about it before we started recording, is that the great bands, the massive bands, everybody knows and loves as being, the Zeppelins and Purples and Black Sabbaths. They started playing bars and pubs to 20 people. They played their dues in live music. They weren't created out of nowhere. They worked on their craft. I live in southwest London now. And there is a pub a mile or so from me. It doesn't exist anymore. There was a pub. And people post some of the lineups from the early 70s of people played there. Led Zeppelin, Cream, Taste, Traffic, David Bowie. This is a pub that might hold 50 or 60 people, but that's how you learn your craft. And there's still got a bit of that in Britain at the moment, but it's not like it was in the 70s.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've seen pictures of it, and I have a piece of the original brick, or one of the original bricks. And when I get over there in the next couple years, hopefully, if everything goes well in the world, I'd like to see, but I'd take pictures and post them on my page, because I don't think a lot of people, especially in the States, get to see it. Imagine if everybody could see where the Beatles started playing at the Cavern Club.
Well, you should, if you come over here, you should, the original Cavern Club isn't there anymore. The new Cavern is sort of 30, 40 yards in the same street. But some of the great venues that we worldwide we hear of us are still there.
Yeah, the Garden Horse is still there.
Yeah. I mean, my most influential club growing up was the Marquee Club in Wardour Street, where everybody played. Now that's not there. Yeah, that's not there as a Marquee Club anymore. But the building is still there, and the base is in a basement. The basement is still there. And the Marquee moved around London, but those venues still exist, and like they do. You come over to Liverpool. You do the Beatles tour of Liverpool, so you go where they all grew up, where they all lived, the places they played. And it's sort of, if you're a musician, or you've got a love of music, it almost brings a tear to your eye still.
You'll have to go with me. We'll
yeah,
go
yeah. Do you know, I get asked now, and because I made a massive, biggest rock band in the world, probably.
One of yeah.
It's, some of the places in East London where these things happened. Would you take me around there? And so, why would you want to do that? But it means a lot to people.
Please do that with me too. I want to take the Iron Maiden tour.
Yeah. It was like, take me to the school you and Steve went to. Well, it's like a school, it's like there, but it means a lot to people. So I respect.
Yeah, I'd love to, and maybe I could finagle it where Steve's not on tour. And maybe you could privately bring him around where I could meet him.
Yeah. Well, British Line are on tour in Britain at the moment, so he's doing really small venues.
Yeah, that's actually pretty cool that he does that.
I think I spoke to him. When did I speak to him? Last few months ago. And he just loves playing. And I think that's sort of why real musicians go in bands in the first place, because they like playing.
Yeah,
the money and the drink and the drugs and the women and whatever. That might be a consequence of that, but it's about playing.
Yeah, I mean, if you love what you do.
Yeah.
And you obviously love what you do, and you've kept at it over the years. What are the future plans for Gypsy's Kiss?
Well, it's like everywhere else in the world. The last 2 years have been difficult.
Yeah.
We had a UK tour planned for this summer just gone, which we managed to only grab half a dozen dates from.
Oh man, that sucks.
And we've had some other, and then recently we had some really good gigs planned, and COVID had got in the way of those because someone in the support band, or actually, including myself, had been tested positive a month or so before.
Yeah.
So we're sort of regrouping. We've got some festivals that we're talking about doing next year.
Cool.
And we'll resurrect all of those gigs we didn't do this summer. And then the plan is we'll record another album next year.
Awesome.
And see how that goes.
You can get on Hard Rock Hell, because if you can get on the Hard Rock Hell Festival.
Yeah, and I have been to the Hard Rock Hell Festival.
I have not, and I'm a DJ for them. But like I said, since I'm a DJ for them, they told me I get access to all the bands. So
they're
a
good.
Big reason to go over.
And I think that's one of the suite of festivals we should pitch for. But we've got some others we've already lined up for the summer.
Got my support. I mean, I play you guys on the radio as it is, so
of which I'm eternally grateful. And thank you for your support.
It's cool. It's really no problem at all when your music's that damn good, man.
Well, thank you.
I mean that as a fan, not just
So our plan is to start writing again for a new album sometime in the new year, and we start playing again, record it in the summer, and perhaps just under a year's time we'll get another album out. Although we've not really gigged and toured this last one enough because of what's got in the way, so we want to put some of that out there.
There you go, man. I'm excited to hear what you come up with next.
And we have to be honest, I and Jonathan Morley, who mostly writes most of the current material with me. We've not given much thought to it. Just got some outline stuff that we'll start working through. What we didn't do with this last album, which is really interesting to me anyway, is because of the pandemic and there wasn't really anything in the way of live music. Normally, as you'll know, you'll write an album, you'll gig it, and then you record it. Well, we didn't do that because we didn't have the opportunity to do it. So, other than we had gigged 2 or 3 of the songs a few times, it was pretty much written and recorded, which is quite unusual. Yeah.
I mean, but you had to do what you had to do with what
absolutely. And sort of, until we have something else out, we're looking for, we've done some of it already, of course. We're looking forward to playing the stuff we've recorded because, as you know, it's different playing live.
Absolutely.
I think so anyway.
Yeah. So, I mean, this could kind of lead into my final question for you then. what is it at the end of the day that you love about music?
That's a really hard question to answer. Yeah, other than if you grow up with it, I grew up, I grew up in the 60s and 70s forming musical opinion, driven
I
by,
should have.
as you and I have spoken privately about before, it was driven by the Beatles, the Stones, the Kinks, and the Who, and that's what drives your love of music.
That's
And
where I
honed,
should have been.
and then honed by 70s music in its various consequences, from classic rock and rock music, the early 70s, to glam rock, even to punk rock, which is very influential. Then it gets ingrained in your soul, doesn't it? And I think once you've gigged with a band, you can never really stop doing it or wanting to do that, because it's one of the biggest highs you can have. This is something more recently. I played to some decent gigs with some really decent bands, but the biggest high is when you're playing your material and the audience is singing it back to you, at whatever level you're at.
Agreed.
That you've written a song and you're performing it, and if you can only see one person in the audience, because typically on a stage you can only normally see one or two people in the audience, and you can see they are singing the words back at you, and they know that makes you want to go and do it again.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's always about audience reaction, isn't it? If people are enjoying it, then you enjoy it even more.
Oh yeah, it goes hand in hand. One hand washes the other, kind of thing. The energy
Andy, let me tell you one final story for your audience. I've probably told you this before, from the very earliest days of Gypsy's Kiss, that, let me remind anyone who's listening, contained the world-renowned finest rock bassist in the world, Steve Harris, on stage at a, reasonably known venue in East London, in one of our very first gigs in 1974. And we were decent then, and we used to get some good audiences. But we did one, Andy, that had 4 people there.
Oh wow, yeah.
And we had 5 people because it had 4 people and a dog. So there were 3 people and a man and his dog, and this is the absolute truth. The man and his dog, he finished his drink and he was about to go home. So we'd have been down to 3. And I said from the stage to the man and his dog, please don't go. I'll buy you a drink and get your dog water if you stay on to the end of the set. And he went, yeah, okay.
Hey, there you go.
It's still the smallest audience I've ever played to. But, it's things like that, but like you do, if you want to be professional, you play that set like, Steve did exactly the same. Close your eyes. There's 1,000 people there.
Yeah.
1,000 people there. It doesn't matter what it is. If only one person is watching you, you give them as professional performance as you can.
And people forget that's how you do this,
Yeah.
Like Steve still says to this day, and Kiss and all those big bands that everybody thinks, oh, they always had it easy. No, they didn't, but they always gave 1,000%.
No.
I seen Kiss in 2004, and I remember the gig because it was raining, and there was like it wasn't even close to full capacity, but they still gave 1,000%. And this is in 2004. You know what I mean? Like it's just crazy. They still you gotta put in the work. You gotta. That one person or those 4 people could have told 30 people that tell 30 other people that bring along 30 other people on top of it to the next one. You know what I mean? Like people forget that that's how this works. You gotta, Well,
the biggest and greatest of bands and the biggest and greatest of rock musicians that we adore and love have played to 20 people.
Look how long the Beatles played in Hamburg.
Yeah, absolutely.
In dingy, dirty clubs, 7 hours. What, 7-hour sets or something like that?
They did 4 sets in a day, didn't they? They were playing at 11 in the morning doing their set, in the Star Club in Hamburg. Which, by the way, if you come to Europe, you must go to where the Star Club in Hamburg was and see where that all started as well.
Oh yeah, it's my goal and plan, but eventually I
Well,
want to move there. But
before we wrap up, Andy, let me say publicly, as I've said to you privately, when you come over to Britain, we'll do the London tour of music, we'll do the Iron Maiden tour, and we're going to have a beer or something in some of the pubs where the biggest bands played.
that'll be awesome. It'll be an
Andy, pleasure to speak to you as normal. And let me say on behalf of myself and the band, huge gratitude for playing our music. And, we've got a small but, decently growing number of American fans and British fans. And, over the past 6 months or so, I've no doubt you've contributed to that. So huge thanks for that.
it's what I do, man. I love your music, and if it's actually able to reach people through my help, that's great.
Cool. Anyway,
You've always got my support, my friend.
thank you, my friend. And great to speak to you. Let's do it again soon.
Absolutely. And if you like what we're doing here, hit the like button, hit the comments. I'm sure David will be around. And hit the subscribe, hang out. But from me, this has been Andy Thunders, and this is David Smith at Gypsy's Kiss. Thank you very much again. Until next time, take it easy, guys.
Thank you very much. Good to speak to you.